If you've seen more than one of my videos or you've seen me live, you've probably seen me play one of a few guitars. This one, or this one, or this one. These are Ormsby guitars and I've been playing them since 2019 and they've become my main guitars that I play. So I wanted to learn more about the brand, so I decided to reach out to Perry Ormsby for an interview, and that's the video that you're about to see. Perry tells us a story of how he built himself a guitar and building the business up to selling thousands of guitars.
That's when I knew this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
We talk about the future of headless guitars, the difference between from a manufacturing side of things ordering guitars from Korea or Indonesia, and we talk about the future of Ormsby and their new factory in Australia. This is a long video, so there's timestamps below if you want to skip to any of those specific points. Make sure to like the video, throw a comment down and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I don't do a whole lot of talking in this video because I'm asking the questions and listening, which I think is kind of the best way to perform an interview. Anyway, thank you for watching, and thanks to Perry for agreeing to do this. Perry Ormsby, I would like to welcome you to the KDH channel. And before we get into Ormsby guitars and how you went from designing kitchens to being a pioneer of multi-scale guitars, let's just start off so the viewers get to know you with a quick fire round of questions. The first one's pretty easy and we can almost tell from your background, but what music do you like?
80s hair metal is my favorite. Blues rock's pretty cool as well, but yeah, the 80s where it's fun-loving. You know, metal doesn't have to be about killing people. It's all about having fun, and that's what gets me going. Yeah, for sure.
That is awesome. So your favorite guitar player, I think we can tell from your background as well.
Oh, Mr. Randy Rhoads. Yeah, for sure. He was definitely my first influence from very early on, and I still believe he's my you know, hundreds of guitar players have influenced me, but Randy's the king.
Final question of the quick fire questions. What is your favorite guitar shape, model, whatever it is, that isn't an Ormsby?
N4 Nuno.
Oh, that's an unusual one.
I like it because it's different. It's unusual. You could say they're pretty rare. I love Nuno's playing, but what I love more about it than anything is the fact that Nuno was playing that before he was anyone, and he still plays it today. I don't know if there's any super duper deal he's on, but he wasn't in the beginning. He chose that guitar for a reason and he's stuck with it. I've been lucky to meet Nuno in person properly once, and he was everything that I had hoped he would be as a like a guitar hero. He was really nice and had all the time in the world, and that just even makes that guitar even more special. I did actually own one for a period of time. I let it go for a trip to America to propose to my now wife. I had some fun with it, and I moved it on to a huge fan that was looking for one, and I thought, this is the right guy for that guitar, and I'm selling it for a good reason. So no regrets. But I loved owning it, I loved playing it, but more than anything, I loved the anticipation of owning it as well. I think there's something to be said for having a desire for something, and working towards that, or searching, or whatever it is, and it makes that thing more special.
And speaking about putting effort in to see the result, that's pretty much the story of Ormsby guitars. So yeah, could you guide us through the beginning? You were a kitchen designer, a cabinet maker, and then you somehow worked into guitars.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, obviously I did woodwork, and I did a little bit of woodwork even before I did woodwork in high school. My grandparents sort of had some tools and would let me tinker around with blocks of wood and stuff like that, and that was always fun doing that. And then I did, went to high school. We did woodwork. That was the number one subject I wanted to do. And then when I got to year 11, they didn't offer woodwork. There was not enough people to offer it as a subject. So I ended up doing what is called TAFE, outside of school vocational training, I guess. But they do little short courses if you want to learn how to do pottery or whatever. So I did woodwork at night on, I'd finish school, I'd ride my bike home, I'd have dinner, I'd ride my bike back to the school where they held the TAFE courses, and I did woodwork there at night, and I thought that was really great. And then from there, I decided I didn't need to go right the way through to year 12. I wanted to get my career started in woodwork. So I went to TAFE and did full-time woodwork as a pre-apprentice doing carpentry and joinery. And there was lots of making dovetail joins and making fancy boxes and scale models of houses and all of that kind of thing. But essentially, after I completed that and actually got an apprenticeship as a carpenter, my first job that I was sent out to was a 3-story building, which was going to have wooden flooring. The floors weren't in yet. And I had to get on top of those walls and clean the excess cement off to put the timber rails down and to start making the roof. And I'm absolutely shit scared of heights. So that didn't work out too well. And, you know, early 90s, nobody had harnesses, nobody cared. If you didn't work fast enough, they shoot a nail gun at you. And it just wasn't, building roofs just wasn't what I wanted to do. But I did see that through to the point where I'd completed all of the schooling in that apprenticeship and managed to get it finished up early. I think I got 18 months cut off the time based on the pre-apprenticeship I did. And the next day started a new apprenticeship as a cabinet maker this time. And I absolutely loved it. So you're making things that are a bit finer detail. I worked for a company that did fit outs of hospitals, but private hospitals, so it's a little bit fancier. You know, I was given a job as a first-year apprentice to make a big curved reception desk for the main reception at this private hospital. And it was all using burl timbers and everything. So that was really exciting. And then I transferred over to a smaller cabinet making shop where we would do kitchen renovations, but we'd also make crazy things like a coffee table with a projector screen in it that would pop up, and I'd have to work out the mechanism for that and make it work.
And you enjoyed doing that stuff?
Yeah, I did. It was good fun because you're given a rough idea and the boss would just go and make it work. There became a point where the boss approached me and said, look, things aren't going so well and we need to let someone go. And you are the last person that joined us 5 years ago, but I've got you another job. I've got you a job across the road, and it might be something you're interested in because you like computers. You know, I mean, we're talking 1998 where computers was a hobby, you know, and it was doing kitchen design. So I'd moved over to this other place and I got, you know, $1.50 extra an hour. So it was like a huge pay rise. And I learned how to use this software. And it turned out that the distributor of the software, he was going to retire and move to New Zealand. So he actually offered me the rights to distribute the software. So I'm like, geez, you know, now I'm going to be a computer nerd, like a proper computer guy, you know. Thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. And he's leaving. So I said, all right, I'll give you $1,000. So I bought this company for $1,000. And then I'm a computer software sales guy for cabinet makers. And I was terrible at it. I can't sell shit. The only reason we sell guitars now is because people want them. I don't sell them guitars. They want them and they ask for them. And I'm like, yeah, okay. It was a good learning curve. It threw me in the deep end in a situation where I wasn't familiar with. I think I ran that little side business for about 4 years. I think I made no money. But it was fun. And I got to do a little bit of traveling to go and meet the software developers and stuff. From there, I obviously had a little network now, and I could pick and choose whichever cabinet maker I would go and work for and use this software. So I ended up choosing somewhere that I thought looked pretty cool. And I spent 6 or 7 years at that place. But one of the things that was great about that place was that I could turn up whenever I wanted and I could leave whenever I wanted. One day, someone said to me, because I talked about building guitars for years. And one day, one of the guys said, sick of hearing about this, mate. You've been talking about this your whole fucking life. I go out and just do it. Whatever you do will probably be pretty bad anyway. And I'm like, damn it, now I've got to go do it. So bought all the woods and I started designing the first guitar. And I wanted I loved PRS. I loved Jackson. They're probably my two inspirations. And I designed this guitar, I guess, that's probably more PRS than Jackson. But I wanted to do inlay. I wanted to do a carved top. I wanted to have a carved back. I wanted a set neck. I wanted all these things. I wanted everything in one guitar, which a lot of people do when they get their first custom. They want everything in one guitar. And spent 3 months getting into work at 5 a.m. My start times were getting later and later. So I'd get in at 5 and I wouldn't start work until 10 a.m. And then I'd have a 2-hour lunch break, and I'd finish an hour early, and I'd work through to 6 at night. And yeah, I got this guitar made, and I had a little website. I was, learning how to do HTML. And so I made a little, I guess it's called a blog now, but back then, I don't think there was any such thing as a blog, but I just do a daily update. Finished the guitar. It came out pretty good. Started planning the second one. And I got an email from a guy who said, could you make a guitar like this? And I'm like, Randy Rhodes, Polka Dot V. Yeah, sure. I can do that. That's, I want to make one of them. That'd be great.
Is that one of them that you've made behind you there?
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, I've made about 8 or 9 now. But yeah, I wanted to do that, and I think I talked about it in my little daily updates. To make my website look all professional, I had an address and everything on there. And email with this guy, and just I could do that, blah blah blah. And probably about 3 or 4 weeks later, I get this letter in the mail, and it's got US postage stamps and the red and blue like stripes on it, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And it was a money order for $1,000 with a note. I hope this is enough of a deposit to get started on that custom we talked about. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? Like, I've only made one guitar. Like, I didn't expect that he'd send me any money. And if he'd asked me how much it was, I'd say, no, I'm not going to, let me build a couple more, let me build some more. But then it's like I was committed then. So I figured, all right, I'll build a few guitars and he can have the best one. Started on the second guitar. I got that most of the way finished. And then my fiance at the time got a pay rise that was equal to my entire wage for the year.
Wow.
So they rang me and said, I just got this big pay rise. Why don't you quit your job and make guitars? Like, cool. So within a week, I had a workshop, which is the office space of a factory unit. I rented the office and the toilet, and just decided I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to do like a uni student or a college student. They take a year off and discover themselves. So I decided I was going to do that. And then I'll go get a real job, And it was, I don't know, it was probably within weeks, the local music store, I was friendly with them. They had got me to fix a headstock repair, and then there was another one, and then there was a pickup install that needed to be routed bigger, and one thing led to another, and I'm now their repair guy, doing anything that they couldn't do in-house. And then I had another guy just turn up one day, and he talked about a custom, and, I'm like, fuck it, I've already taken someone's money, and I'm already started a few other projects, and I'm pretty confident I can do this. And even if I don't get the first one right, I will keep building guitars until I get it right, And I'd said to everyone, it's going to be 2 years at least. But that second deposit that came through, I decided I'm going to do that guitar first because he was local. And 10 days later, I delivered it to a gig that he was playing. And that's when I knew this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. He had a big mohawk. He's a big guy. He's like a Boilermaker, so he's carrying around steel girders all day. He's huge. I rocked up with the guitar, and his band was going on next. I'm like, mate, I finished, And he started crying in front of all of his friends. He was crying, and everyone was so, man, I felt like, what the hell? This meant so much to him. And of course, the story later was he tried for years to try and get this guitar built by anyone, and no one wanted to touch it. It was a baritone 7-string. Baritones were almost non-existent back in 2004. I think there was one ESP model, Max Cavalera model, I think. 10 years he'd been trying to get this guitar built, and, he was crying, and there was tears, and everyone was so happy for him. And I just knew then that was, man, if I can do this for people, doing kitchen renovations is cool. You design it up, you measure it up, you show the boys how to make it, you help out with the fabrication a little bit. You might even go around there and do some final bits when it's all installed, but
people aren't emotionally invested in their kitchen like
yeah,
they would be a guitar.
And it's usually, we found that like kitchen renovations happen when people are getting close to a divorce because they're trying to fix their marriage, or someone is in distress because their house has been turned into a bomb zone, and it's just an absolute mess for a week or two, and then it's all fine, but the mess is still in their mind, and they haven't been able to have showers for a day because the plumbing got cut off, and there's all these things that it was not as much satisfaction, and we built some amazing kitchens. Most expensive one was $75,000 back in 2000,
so even more, yeah.
50 grand now, I don't know, but it was crazy. But there was not as much, emotional investment, and people are thinking about what the next owner wants. So let's go safe with colors and design, because the other people that buy the house in 10 years might not like it, whereas this guy, he had a dream, and I told him 18 months to 2 years, and 10 days later I'm delivering it. And he's come back and ordered 4 more customs over the years. He didn't know it was my second guitar that I'd ever finished. I didn't tell him that for about 6 months, but he's always just let me just do whatever I want. He'll come in with a simple 1-sentence idea and say, and I want that in a 7-string, and then that's it. I can do whatever I want. He's a great client and friend, and that kick started the whole thing. And going to a gig where nobody knew who I was, and at the end of it, like, people are loving me. That was felt pretty good. And I thought, geez, this could be
your work was being appreciated when it
this could be, and it's being appreciated in a way that I can appreciate my work too. I you can do an amazing kitchen, but I don't get to use it. I don't get invited around for a pizza, but I can go to a gig and I can see that, and it's pretty special, So yeah, I just decided I have to make this work. And unfortunately, I broke up with my fiance at the time. She was in full support of me going off and doing this thing for a year, but as soon as I'd done it, she wasn't in support, because I'm not bringing in the same income. I'm in no income basically, and we didn't last. But didn't matter. We had a house together. We sold that, and I was lucky that had gone up, and I had a little bit of money that could last me. I'm used to living off nothing. And I made that money last me a further 6 years. Worked out to about $8,000 a year I lived on. And until the business got to a point where I could actually take some money out, I just kept reinvesting and buying more materials and buying more timbers and parts and pickups and just better machines. And, when I first started out, I would rent the machines from the local woodwork school. I'd go down and rent their bandsaw for an hour, and I'd take all the things down I needed to get done, and I'd forget to do one cut, and have to go back. They had a surface planer and a thicknesser, and I'd go down and rent those for an hour. And eventually, I bought all that gear and moved out of the little office space that I had and moved into a bigger space, and, started doing a lot of repairs, and became the kind of go-to guy for repairs, especially for the metal community. I understood 7 strings. I understood that not everyone wants 9 to 42 strings. Not everyone tunes in E. Back in the days when EMGs were the pickup to have, stores didn't cater for metal guys as much. But that experience of doing the repairs gave me access to a lot of different guitars. And at one point we were doing between 35 and 40 guitars a week repair-wise.
Wow.
So we'd see everything, absolutely everything.
And was this a one-man shop at this point, or did you have...
So I quit my job in February 2004, and I got my first assistant in 2008, I think. And he was just kind of, a couple of days a week kind of thing. And, he sort of helped me around the shop sort of thing. But yeah, I'd jump in my car and I'd go out to one of the music stores on a Monday and pick up their stuff from the weekend. And then Tuesday, I'd go to another music store and pick up all their gear and drop the first shops off on Thursday. And it just became this thing where, yeah, I had a few of the bigger stores in our area were sending me all of their work, and I, negotiated contracts so that I would take almost anything that came in. So if it was just a restring, the store would do it. But if it was a setup, I'd get it. If it was a jack replacement, they'd do it. But if it was a jack and a pot, then it was mine, And we're able to see, it was just interesting seeing the different ways that guitars were made up close and personal. You can go into a shop and you can have a look, but you don't get to take it apart, and you don't see where things fail. So, everyone knows that Gibson's headstock snap, but why do they snap and where do they snap? And, what was the cause of that particular snap? And then you look at an Ibanez, okay, so that has a neck on it too, but you don't see those breaks. So what's different, And Fenders don't break, or when they do, they break in a different spot. And why is that? So we're able to see a lot of things like that, and that's shaped the way I built guitars, because I could,
fix the problems before they happen.
Yeah, I want a mahogany neck like a Gibson, but I need to lower the headstock angle so that there's more straight grain where the nut is, because you've got this huge big cavity where the nut goes on the end of the truss rod. We need to make that smaller, and you need to add a volute in there, and that more than doubles the amount of wood, and then it won't break as easily, little things like that. Why does this particular guitar have tuning problems when it's got the same tuners as this guitar, but they never seem to have tuning problems when you're doing a setup? So you're able to compare a lot of guitars, and that's really, I guess, where the whole GTR line came from, is I started noticing that I actually would take notes as well. So I had this little exercise book, and I would write notes about the guitars and what I'm noticing. And going back through that one day, I noticed that, these LTDs only have problems with the jack. They never come in for fret problems. They never come in for broken headstocks. They never have cracked fretboards. They never have all these things. They only have a problem with the jack, or maybe a replacement pot. And when I'm setting them up, I'm not finding that I have to do a fret level, which I may have to do on a different brand, And then one day I noticed that the font on the serial numbers for those guitars was the same as other guitars that I didn't have a lot of problems with. And I saw this pattern. There was about 3 brands that I noticed I'd look at the serial number. Oh, yeah, that's that font. This will be good, And then one day I realized that font was the same as on a PRS SE. And that said, proudly made at World Music.
They were the first brand to actually say that, yeah.
That's exactly right. And I realized they're probably being made in the same factory. And, by this point in time, 2013, I genuinely had a 3-year waiting list for my guitars. I'm trying to make as many guitars as possible. I'd pretty much given up doing repair work. And I thought, maybe we can, people wait 3 years for a guitar, and 2 years they don't have a problem with. 2.5 years they start getting a bit, impatient, and fair enough. And 3 months before I'm finished their guitar, they're kind of like, they're done with it. They don't want to wait anymore. And that became a lot of problem. If I could get the wait list down, I can not have those problems. So we stopped taking orders for a while, but my solution was, why don't I just get 20 guitars made at this place in Korea, and then we can fit it with hardware and pickups and stuff. And when someone places an order for a custom, I'll ship them one of these guitars and say, look, it's not what you wanted, but it's going to be in the ballpark, and you can at least be playing something of mine.
Until you get your custom.
And then when your custom's ready, you ship that one back. We ship you the custom. We fix up and rebuff and whatever, and send that guitar off, that loaner guitar off to the next one. And the feedback I got from clients was, that's a brilliant idea, but why would we want to send it back? It's now going to be our backup guitar. I'm like, I never thought that maybe people would want to buy them. How would, and that's how the GTR line came about. But it came about because I was looking for another solution. But the GTR line has become the business now. It's definitely taken off. It's crazy. It's exceeded any expectations we ever had in the beginning. Even our wildest dreams were smashed. It's been amazing.
And it happened quite quickly. You went from a small custom shop into a brand that were showcasing at NAMM, and you had a production line of guitars. I remember the press at that time. You went from not a lot of people knowing about your stuff to instantly you were one of the very few at the time who had multiscales on show. So was it hard to convince people? Was it hard to convince people like this is a multiscale and here's why?
No, because we'd spent 10 years trying to convince. Like even before that first order that I finished, the guy that cried, that convinced me that longer scale lengths are better, right? Because he wanted a baritone. I never played a baritone, never even repaired a baritone. What's this silly thing? Oh, you tune it B to B. Why would you do that? That's a bit weird. But then when I heard him play it, it's like, yeah, okay, I get it now. It sounds way better. And the extra scale length meant that he could run 46 gauge strings tuned to B, because that's what he did. And it's like, geez, it sounds really good. It's not flubby. It's tight. It still sounds pretty good. We've got to make this work. But for me, I couldn't play solos on it. It was just too much. There was too much tension. The frets were just that little bit further apart. And I was trying to work out, how do we fix that? And maybe we can have just like a couple of strings that are longer with one scale length, and then four other strings are on a different scale length. And now that's not going to work. And at the time, I was suffering a lot from carpal tunnel syndrome. I'd literally have to get a big bowl of water, hot water, and put my arm in there for 10, 15 minutes and warm up my arm before I could play without any pain. And I was trying to fix that as well. And I found that when I was lazy with my bar chords and didn't keep my fingers straight parallel to the frets, if I sort of angled them a bit, it straightened my wrist. And that meant I could play for longer before I had tendon problems. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can somehow angle all the frets parallel, but all a consistent angle all the way. And maybe that'll fix my problem. But nobody will ever want that. And I mentioned it to a client. He's like, oh, Rickenbacker did that. I'm like, okay, so they did it, but it failed, obviously, because we don't see those guitars out there. And then one day, I don't know, I was just drawing up a guitar, and it kind of didn't draw it right. And it's like, that looks pretty cool. Imagine that, and I drew it all out, and I worked it all out, and I had no idea that anyone had ever done anything like this before. I developed the whole thing. I worked out how to, kind of fix the intonation problem that guitars have, because the fret spacing. That was all fully developed by mid-2004. I think the first CAD drawing, end of 2004. And I spent 4 years showing that drawing to everyone that came into the shop. Check out this, like, and no one was convinced. I didn't have enough money or time to actually make a prototype to see if it worked. And I went on holiday with an acquaintance, I guess. We went over to see an Ozzy Osbourne gig in Sydney in 2008, and I was telling him all about this. And he's like, oh, I've heard of this before. Like, that's called fan frets. Fuck, that's a great name. Like, what's that? I've been calling it multiple scale lengths. And he's like, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll do you a deal. I'll order 2 of them. You build one. You got to give me a good discount for 2. But the first one, if it doesn't work, we don't do the second one. And obviously we'll work out what happens if it doesn't work, kind of thing. And yeah, sure enough, I decided to build it and YouTubed the whole thing. Decided if I'm going to go in, I'm going to go in strong. And I made little YouTube videos for each part of it. And copped a shit ton of backlash. Everyone said it was crazy, but it was a hit. I spent 4 years trying to convince anyone that this was a good idea, and that first one was amazing. It was just going to the first gig where it was played and people losing their minds, and it took 18 months to sell the second one, another one to get order, and then it was 6 months for the third one, and then after that it became the majority of our builds, to the point where we've only built a handful of standard scale guitars in the last 10 years. And most of those have been because I've just said, we've got a fretboard from years ago that we never used. We'll just make that into a guitar. It's all multi-scale now. There was, nobody had ever heard of anything like that before. 14 years now since that first one.
And you're now progressing, because you started off with the GTR range in Korea, and now you're expanding that line to the GTI range in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So that's a lower price point, but still semi-multi-scale.
Yeah, so it depends on the model, of course. We wanted was obviously, when we released the GTR range, we had expectations of what I thought we could sell, right? And what would be worth doing that project. And, our 5-year projections were met within 18 months, so it blew up. We used to have a lot of people that would say, I can't afford a custom, I'd love a custom. And of course, the GTR catered for those people. We started to get a lot of people from, not necessarily first world countries, not the USA, not the bigger countries in Europe, that wanted a guitar, like all of Brazil, for example. They can't afford a GTR. So what can we do to cater for those guys? And on one of the trips up to World Music in Korea, they told me that they'd bought this factory in Indonesia, and they had basically tried to retrain everyone. It didn't work. So they've got rid of 90% of the workforce, kept the handful of people that were good, and sent 25 of the Korean staff down to the Indonesian shop for a year to train everyone. So I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see some samples. And they showed me some samples, and they were pretty good. So it was probably another couple of years before we went ahead with it. And we did try what we called the GTX series, which was using a factory in China. The factory was overseen by the daughter of one of the guys that was an owner at World Music. So there was a bit of a trust thing there. They didn't turn out how we liked. We ended up rejecting the first batch. We got another batch, and they still didn't quite meet what we wanted. We ended up rerouting every guitar, respraying every guitar, and we can't do that for a guitar in that price range. So we ended up going with World Music. We thought, okay, we know the guys at World, we know how they work. It's pretty simple. It's a no-brainer. We'll give them a couple of orders. The GTI range is good because it meets that lower price target. But in all honesty, we do spend a lot more time on a GTI than we do a GTR, getting it to meet spec. We end up fret leveling a lot more guitars. And that's something I'm not 100% happy with. We shouldn't have to be doing that sort of thing. They are a lower price guitar, and there should be a lot of things that we go, you know what, that's just a lower price guitar. But we just aren't able to do that in ourselves. So we will continue with the GTI line, but it's not going to be anywhere near the volumes of the GTRs. And we're not looking to replace the GTRs. The GTRs are number one, if you know what I mean. And GTIs will just be a supplement, a small supplement to that, to do things like, the semi-multi-scale with the Evertune. There's Evertune's great, but there's not a huge market for them, worldwide. So we could cater for some of that, and we can help some people out. But I never foresee that, technically GTIs being a lower price point, we should sell twice as many as GTRs, but it won't be that. It'll be 10% of the GTR line. We don't want to be bogged down doing that extra work. that is required. So we know and trust the GTRs. We know how long it takes to do the QC on each one. And we want to stick to that. We know that we can, there's a lot more GTIs that we reject. In fact, we've only ever rejected 4 GTRs out of 7,000 guitars. Like physically, no, there's no way we can make this work. Get rid of it, chop it up, whatever. The GTIs are significantly higher number that we would reject. I'm sure most companies would just let them go. I'm not happy doing that. So the GTIs are just a supplement to the range. They're never going to be the, you look at, let's say, USA, Gibson, their custom shop is only a percentage of their USA line, right? Their Epiphones sell 10 times more. I don't want that to be like that with the GTIs. They're just a supplement.
Okay, well, you've actually kind of somewhat answered the next question I was going to ask. I was going to say, guitar players, we talk about that this guitar is made in Japan, this guitar is made in America, this guitar is made in Korea, whatever. But as a guitar manufacturer, you're ordering in bulk. Is there a difference in the ordering process for a factory in, say, Korea or Indonesia? Is there like more contact with certain factories at the higher price point, or is it somewhat the same?
The way it works with World is, when we first approached them, they basically said, look, you can have guitars or you can have guitars with a little bit more effort. And it's like, well, we want the best you can do. So we do pay a little bit of a premium that some of the brands don't, and some of them do. But and communication is really good with Korea. There's certainly been patches where, you might have to wait 4 days for an email to be replied, or you might ask 10 questions and only get 3 answers. Communication in the last year or so has been really good. We can get sometimes we get replies in 5 minutes, With Indonesia, we might wait 2 weeks for a reply. And that, if we need to make a change to a spec, or, we get a guitar in and it's like, okay, it's supposed to be, I don't know, let's say a Burl, and it's got a blue candy over it, and we want that shade reduced by, 1 shade, or we want a little bit darker burst on the edge. It's too late by the time that we give them the feedback. And so there's that as well. With Korea, if we ask them, whilst production's going along, can I get a photo of where you're at with the necks? We can get that photo that day. We don't get that at all with Indonesia. And in fact, sometimes we're told we're not sure when they're starting. And then the next day they say, oh, it's actually ready to ship. Everything's ready to ship. So there's definitely a communication problem there, which I'm not comfortable with. It's hard to be transparent when people aren't being transparent with you. You know what I mean? We also, with Korea, for example, there's been countless times that they've reached out to us and said, hey, look, I know that you've asked for this, but would you mind if we did this? And it's never a shortcut thing or a cheaper cost thing. It's always, they think that this might be better, and that's great, but you wouldn't get that with Indonesia. They're there to produce products, and whereas the Korean factory is more of a love project. You know what I mean? They're not making.
They want their products to be good and be proud of.
They get really involved. You know what I mean? Like, I remember the first time I visited Korea, there's all the guys in the buffing area have got headphones on, and talk to a couple of guys, and they don't speak English, but, you get introduced to them, and then they pull their headphones out and they're listening to Psychroptic while they're buffing an SX model, you know what I mean? And that was crazy, because they're excited, and they're really, I've always felt loved when I've gone up there, that everyone's excited for you to be there, and they're really proud to show you their work too, and they're very, I've seen some other videos where other manufacturers have gone to visit the shop, and you see them walk around and everything. My experience has not been like their experience, at least what they show on video. they seem to be very proud of what they're doing, and they want to stop you and ask you, is this what you want, kind of thing, or how do you think of this, or but I have certainly had comments from the factory a number of times that every time we place an order, it's fun because it's always crazy colors, is something different. They're not making 700 matte black tellies, it's something a bit different, or we've pushed them in a direction they haven't been yet, or just doing like the headstock angle. And then on a multi-scale, we compound angle it. Some brands just did the little triangle from what they call a triangle from hell on the end of the fretboard, whereas we compound angle it, and you would have noticed that on your guitar. The headstock's tilted as well.
Yeah.
Developing that on their CNC machines was a nightmare, but they did it. There was never it'd be easier if we did this. And I know Ibanez took the alternate version, but yeah, Korea have always been really good at, and anytime we've wanted to make a change to anything, it's not a problem. Whereas Indonesia, it's like, oh, we can't do it next time, but we can do it the time after, and for me is, we aren't, if we were making the same model guitars every month for 18 months, that'd be one thing, but we don't. We change it up every time. There's always something different, and Korea is really open to doing that, which is really nice. But the Indonesian side of things, it's not as easy to do those things. So that's why I guess we love working with world music so much.
That's really cool. I have two more questions. These are kind of more small questions. Headless guitars, they're kind of making a resurgence, and you've been one of the brands who've kind of, I don't want to say gone all in, but you've certainly gone in quite a bit on Headless. Do you see a long-lasting future with Headless, or do you think it's going to maybe die down, or what are your thoughts on that?
I enjoy playing a Goliath, our Headless model. A Headless probably wouldn't be a guitar that I would play if I didn't make them, right? And it took me a long time to be comfortable with a headless guitar, because I want to see the headstock. I want to, you slide your arm down. I want there to be something there. When it comes down to it, there's been a number of times where we've all sat around at the workshop and said, what happens if the headless thing just dies off? And the general consensus is at the shop is, well, if it does, it does. We've got a million other ideas to do. You know what I mean? So I do enjoy it. The guys that buy a headless guitar absolutely love them. So I don't think they're going anywhere soon. And whilst the Goliath doesn't outsell the hype, I believe that's more because we do twice as many hype runs as we do Goliaths. I think if we did equal numbers, we always sell out of Goliaths almost instantly. We've just never got enough stock to see if it outsells another model,
Your stock is selling really fast as well, I noticed. Like, you'd never really have a guitar staying up for a long time.
It sucks, because by the time a guitar gets put on the website, you've got 100 people that want it, and then 99 people are disappointed, But yeah, look, I think Headless are here to stay, because the guys that do have them, there are so many benefits. And, you see people talk about, I can fit in the overhead locker of an aircraft or whatever. But who cares, right? But it's the, as an Australian, we all live in, the majority of people live in a house on a block of land. They don't live in an apartment. Everyone owns a car or two. People don't generally choose public transport because they've got a car, and we drive wherever we need to go. But for someone in Paris, for example, they live in an apartment. They catch public transport, or London even. They catch public transport. They don't own a car. So they have a Helix or something similar. They have maybe a laptop that they plug into, and they can put their guitar in a gig bag that fits on their back, and they can catch public transport and go and do a gig. And when I realized that that's probably why a lot of people are buying the guitars, it wasn't about just being different, although there's that as well. It's that this is convenient for these guys. They don't own a car. You know, they don't own a car. They can't carry around a big head and cabinet setup. They can't get to gigs with a guitar case with a long guitar on the bus, you know. So it becomes a something that's more convenient for them. And also the fact that they're so much lighter helps out with those guys that, you know, playing an hour-long gig, head banging, their back is shot, you know. So if you could take a couple of kilos off that strap, then that means all the world to them, you know. So I don't think Headless are going anywhere anytime soon. But if for some reason they do, we've got so many ideas that we want to do. It's not going to make a difference, you know. If instantly Headless was just dead, oh man, we could release so many other models, you know, that we just can't fit in. You know, I think we've got like 6 or 7 fully developed models we haven't released yet because we just can't seem to fit it into the schedule. You know, you don't know if something's going to sell, or when you do release something, it takes a while for people to get used to. A Futura model is an example of that. We've done a couple of runs of those, but it takes 3 or 4 runs for people to get familiar with them enough to want one. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, we'll fill those build spots with Headless guitars or hypes any day of the week. But yeah, I don't think Headless are going anywhere. There's too many benefits for the guys that see the benefits, you know?
I didn't think about the public transport thing. That makes so much more sense. You know, just get a little Line 6 Helix thing, put it in. You could even fit the HX Stomp in your gig bag and you've got a full rig.
Well, the gig bag we had made, it was to suit I think it's a 15-inch screen laptop. So the front pocket, your laptop in there if you need to. It all comes down. And I guess this is why Headless is so much more popular in Europe as well. We sell a lot more in Europe than we do, let's say, the USA. Whereas hypes, it's almost the other way around, you know. But you look at most of America; they're not living in apartments.
Favorite shape, the SX machine. I've come to love this. It's because the SX features the 29 frets and all of that. That's my favorite Ormsby, and the way that you've combined the hype thin body and the lightweight. Well done on this. This is great.
Actually, we only ever did the one run of the SX machines. And I think we might have built a couple that were not in that run. But we do have we're moving into the new shop and we're going to have an Aussie production model. And the SX machine is on that list of guitars to do. Obviously, it's Hypes and Goliaths will come first. And then third on that list is an SX carved top. But also the SX machine is something that we would like to do again, as well as a regular Aussie production run where you can order a guitar and we know that in 3 months we're doing a batch of 30 of them, you know. We want to make more of those. They were cool. We did some for NAMM, I think 2017 and 2018. I mean, the SX was the most popular guitar that we made up until the GTRs, really.
Really?
Yeah, the SX was, you know, someone ordered a guitar, it was an SX. And then we released the GTRs. We did the SX and the Hype. It's the first run. And I think we did 50 SXs and 150 or 100 Hypes, I think it was. And that, people will actually like Hypes a bit more, you know, in that price range. But then from that point on, it was just been Hypes, you know. I mean, if you looked at our order books now, we've got 1 SX to make custom, maybe 2. But I think it's also because we don't do as many of them now, so they're not seen as much as the Hype, you know.
Yeah, so there's not as much demand because they don't know it's there.
Yeah. And, you know, we can go 3 months without an inquiry for one, but then when we do a run of them, that's all people talk about.
But your new factory is way bigger than your old one. You're expanding, aren't you?
The new factory, we moved into the space that we're leaving in just after the GTR runs. The first 2 runs arrived, and we couldn't keep up. I'd end up moving back to my home to work from home. And that worked really well because I wasn't renting a factory anymore, so I'm saving a couple of grand there. I could work from home. I can get to work half an hour earlier. I could finish half an hour later. There's so many benefits to working from home. I wasn't going out for lunch. It was so much better. And but when the GTR runs first started coming in 2016, it was just too much. I had my shed. We expanded that shed by 50%. There was 3 of us working in there. I had 2 staff at that time. We ended up building another shed the same size on the property, and it got so full of guitars. A container would come in and we'd have to unload the container. I had built shelves that went over my cars, and I've got guitars in there. The second run when it came in, we were so short on space in both the big sheds, and they're big sheds. I emptied my spa, and we put guitars. I could fit 14 guitars in the spa, and I could lock it. So it's like, oh, this is a great little place to hide them. My games room was full of guitars. My hallway had a line of guitars down the wall. My foyer, like my little foyer where the front door is, was full of guitars. It was just out of control, and it was like that for a month as we get through the orders. So we had decided that we had to move, and we moved to the shop that we're moving out of now. But the problem is that as the business has grown and more staff have come on board, and we are trying to get more guitars each time so that we've got a little bit of a stockpile that lasts a bit longer, rather than selling out so quick, we've just run out of space. We ended up, we started off with a machining room and a lunch room, and then a working space and a QC room, and then that became the office, and the foyer had to become the lunch room, and the lunch room got knocked down to put a mezzanine in, and there's 8 or 9 of us working in there, and it's at the point where if someone needed to go to the toilet, someone else has got to stop work, walk down to the end of the bench, let that person walk through, only to find someone else is already on the toilet. So then they've got to come back. You've got to stop doing your work. You've got to move out of the way. And it was so cramped in there. It was just, we couldn't find anything. If I needed to work on a custom, it's not in that rack there because that rack's full. So it's somewhere else. I've been put in a box so I didn't get damaged. Or where's that box gone? And it was so frustrating to work like that. So we did end up buying a new factory. It's just over twice the size of what we had. It has a really big office space. Most importantly, it's got 2 toilets, so that's great. But it's got a showroom upstairs. So for the first time ever, we're going to have a little showroom with about 40 guitars in there. We've got a mezzanine for storage that is half the size of the old factory, just over half the size of the old factory. So we could store up to 800, 900 guitars at any one time, which will allow then go to monthly orders. And, we can have guitars come in, but we don't necessarily have to sell them straight away to get them out the door because we've got storage space. We can release half of them now and half in 6 months, and to try and keep more of a flow. Whereas before, it'd be like, get a container in, we get the pre-orders out, we've got to get back onto doing some customs, we've got to move these boxes out of the way, then we can do some QC on some more GTRs. It was just too much. Now we can actually look at having a production line for the Australian made guitars, whereas, being custom, every guitar is different. There's a few that are similar, and we try to do runs of the customs as well to try and keep it a bit more efficient, but essentially every guitar's its own thing. So what we want to do is, we're not ever going to get rid of the custom shop, but what we want is to be able to build guitars and not have to necessarily stress over the tiniest detail,
Yeah.
And that can come down to a guy wanting 2mm side dots on the side of his fretboard rather than 2.1 mil, or something like that. We want to be able to build guitars. We love building guitars, but we don't necessarily want to be bogged down by the specs. So we've developed a hype line and a Goliath line, and they have 3 levels. And we have been buying up timbers and hardware for the last 9 to 12 months in preparation for this. But the idea is we want to be able to have 30 guitars a month being produced, and and going out the door. So I guess we're becoming more like a Jackson USA line or a PRS line or whatever. We've never really had a Australian production. It's always been full custom or go to a GTR, in that middle space.
And I suppose at the very beginning, like, you're a luthier. You want to be building guitars as well as...
Well, we it was probably a year ago now that we all sat down because, needed to have a whinge, I guess, with the staff. And I said, look, I'm getting so bogged down by CAD drawings and making sure we've got enough 6-string black pickup bobbins and how are we going for masking tape. And I feel like I'm always organizing everything else, and I need to get away from that. And I need people to take responsibility for some of those things. And I want to make guitars again, but I need to be able to come in and do some stuff and not have to be going and checking specs for 20 minutes because I might only get 40 minutes of build time that morning, So we came up with a thing where it was called Perry's Choice. The idea was supposed to be that every month I would build a guitar that I felt like building, didn't matter what it was. It hasn't quite worked out like that. We've only made about 7 in 12 months, I think. But that's fun because I normally still go into work on a Saturday and I do admin, the last few emails we didn't get to. But now I'm going in on Saturdays to build a guitar. So I don't do anything else and I end up, look at my phone and see the time. Oh, shit, I was supposed to be home 3 hours ago. Get out of here. But it's good fun because I can do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about what anyone's, specs are or whether they like that shade of white or that shade of white. I can do whatever I want. And that's been a lot of fun. But it also lets me do things that I want to do, but no one's asked for.
One of those guitars was the coolest thing I had seen in a very long time. It was the swirled, but it wasn't paint. It
resin?
Was resin swirl top. That was so cool.
We made those tops 3 years ago.
Wow.
And it's like, we'll do it for NAMM or something. And as you're leading up to NAMM, it's like, okay, we've got 8 weeks to NAMM. We've only got 4 customs. We need another 12. What are we going to do? Oh, well, here's a list of 20. Okay, well, let's do this. Shit, that's going to take way longer. We better stop on that one, even though we're halfway through, because we can get this one done faster. And I experimented with those resins to get it to the way I wanted it to look. And we've probably made 30 tops, 40 tops. But that first one that we made was me wanting to be a little bit of a passion and warfare swirl without it being a traditional swirl. And that was a lot of fun, like playing around with that stuff. We've just finished a Goliath that's the same, which we haven't put on the website. And we've got another couple. I enjoy making those. So that first one was the Perry's Choice, but I've made another 4 or 5 that are, getting close to being finished that are like, okay, well, I can't keep doing the same thing every month. So let's just make a whole bunch. We're not going to call them Perry's Choice. They'll just be custom shops, But like things like that, or the laser etching was something that was like, I think we should laser etch the front of a guitar and like color it in, and that'd be pretty cool. I need an outlet for my ideas too. I've got so many ideas that I don't even bother writing them down anymore. I've come up with an idea. It's a really good idea. I mention it to the boys. Everyone's keen, and then we forget about it because there's always ideas, And then 3 years later, it's like, oh, well, did we end up making that or did we not make that? No, we didn't make it. Oh, let's go and do it now. But we need to do that, I think, as a custom shop. The boys at work, they're all excited to build guitars, but it's also exciting doing something new and fresh. So the idea is if we can do the production line stuff, we can get that done, and that gives us the opportunities to do more of our own things. And I would love it if someone placed an order and they could order it being built by a particular guy. You know what I mean? So Jet and Alex are my 2 main guys in the shop. They could request Alex build it, or they could request Jet build it, or whoever comes on board in the future, you know. And that would be fun, I reckon. You know,
Yeah, it'd be a bit like the Fender Custom Shop.
Yeah, Fender Custom Shop do that, but I don't know that PRS Custom Shop does that. You know what I mean? And you certainly would with Gibson. You might get a Tom Murphy finish on your guitar, but you don't know who the hell built it. I think that'd be really cool if you could, you know, I don't have to be the guy. My guys that work for me are just as good as me, you know. I don't need to check their work when it comes to building guitars. They're just as good as me. Jet's shaped way more necks than I ever will, you know. He's the go-to guy for shaping necks, you know. Alex is the go-to guy for routing. He can route twice as fast as I can, and you know, they've all given free rein to find their little niche within the building of a guitar. Yeah, and it's good the way it works. So I want to do more stuff like that, and just I kind of felt like we used to do lots of cool customs, and then we kind of got a bit bogged down trying to be a bit more efficient, and maybe the customs weren't as custom. And we're trying to bring it and go the next level. You know, like when we did the copper tops, no one had ever done a copper top before. You know, this, and obviously the resin top. We want to do stuff like that. We've got so many ideas. We're working with forged carbon at the moment. So I saw a Lamborghini, I think it was last year or whatever, they announced that they're doing forged carbon suspension components, and it's chopped fiber that's forged in a press. Whereas, you know, carbon fiber is generally put in a vacuum bag or whatever, but this is actually heat forged, and it's significantly stronger, but it looks really cool. And it came out pretty good. And it's, I don't know when we'll finish that guitar, but it's, it was going to be for NAMM 2021, but of course that didn't happen.
Are you going to be at the, I don't even know if it's a thing, or if it's going to be a thing, the next NAMM? I know a lot of manufacturers, including yourself, didn't make a presence at the latest one.
Look, the reason for 2021, we obviously NAMM was taking deposits, and we weren't sure if we could leave the country, and they were not open to the idea of us paying for a booth, but then being able to pull out, get our money back if we couldn't even leave the country at the time. So we held off that, and of course it didn't happen anyway. And then 2022 happened recently, but we decided no one I knew was going. None of the builders that I talked to, friendly or occasionally, none of them were going. So I kind of thought, okay, and the map got smaller, the NAMM map got smaller, and it's like, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with that. And there's still a lot of mandates on, you know, how long are we going to be in quarantine for? You know, we had pretty strict rules on that here with COVID. So we didn't go. And apparently it was quite a good show from the reports I've heard. For April next year, which is when the next NAMM is, we will be there. We're looking forward to it. My kids are old enough to appreciate Disneyland now, so the whole family's coming. I'm really looking forward to it.
Perry, thank you so much for speaking with us on the channel. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.